All right, guys, welcome back to the podcast. Today, I have an interview for you. I have Felicity here joining us from Australia. You guys are going to love her accent. I met her. I love Australian accents. I was telling my husband that the other day. I met an Australian in Detroit, and I'm like, there is something about that voice. It's so soothing. I love it. But I met Felicity a few years ago through she was a mutual mastermind member of a program that I did for moms. So I'm really excited for you to share your story with us. She's been through a few hardships, to say the least, and she'll share with you. I told her we might have to do an episode 1 and an episode 2 because I just don't know if we can get it all done in a half hour, 45-minute podcast episode. She has so much to share from parenting, and I think we talked a little bit about getting like the medical expenses or medical with the children, and we'll get into that. And I think you had a car accident, and I know that like Australia's on fire. There's just like all kinds of things. So I'm going to let Felicity go ahead and introduce herself. I'm going to mute myself because it's kind of noisy where I'm at, and then I will just ask questions as we go along. Okay.
Hi, everyone. Hi, I'm Felicity. I live in Australia, as you can hear. I am a mum to 2 magical unicorn children who drive me nuts and push me every single day. I've got my amazing husband. I have a horse. I have a dog who decided to have an altercation with a snake the other day. So we had to take him off to the vets, which was not quite what we planned on a Sunday night. So I just thought I'd sort of, Sasha put out the call for anyone who wants to share their story. And I thought, you know what, I have a few. Let's figure out one.
Absolutely. And so the one that we were talking about first is you have a new member of your family, your daughter, and I don't even know her name, so I'll let you introduce her here in a second. And she is technically 5 months old, but she is only supposed to be about 7 weeks old. So let's start there.
Okay. Yep. No worries. Okay. So we got introduced to our daughter 5 months ago. She was born at 26 weeks and 4 days gestation. Obviously, you don't plan to have a microprem baby. We had no sort of signs that she was coming. I had a hospitalization a couple of weeks previous, but they were suggesting they didn't really know what it was. There was no sort of one size fits all, and they're suggesting potentially it was a maternal infection. However, they don't know. They can never know for sure. We live approximately sort of half an hour sort of south of one town and 45 minutes north of another big town. So we live on quite a sort of a rural sort of location. I decided to go into labour on a Sunday morning, which again, don't recommend. We had to call the ambulance out here to try and get me into hospital. I went into first sort of signs of pain was about 1:30 in the morning. Called the ambulance at about 4, I think. And I was, full-blown labour by this stage. So obviously very fast, throwing up, the whole shebang, and as you do when you're 26 weeks pregnant, you freak out. You're like, it's too early, and that sort of thing. They took me into the nearest hospital, which was Hamilton. So that's, as I said, 30 minutes north. Now, they don't do prem babies. Basically, they don't accept anything less than 38 weeks. So we freaked them out, as you can imagine. I had I think they classify labour into sort of 3 different stages. First stage was like 4 hours. My second stage was like 4 minutes. And then she was bam out, basically. She was, that movie Gone in 60 Seconds? She's basically gone in 60 seconds. And interestingly enough, her name is Eleanor. I don't know if anyone knows the car of that movie. That is her name. So basically she was born, then she was born obviously very early, very small, not breathing. So she was resuscitated and then intubated and kept manually alive until a specialist medical team called the Piper, which is just an acronym for them. They flew out here from Melbourne, which is our nearest capital city. They took 3 hours to get here. So Hamilton manually kept her alive because they had no other way to keep her alive. So they had her ventilated through her esophagus and just inflating her chest. And so like a little manual pump. And literally we're just doing that, just taking it in turns, doing that just to try and inflate her lungs and keep her alive, so to speak. So yeah, that was sort of one of the scariest days you will ever have.
I was going to say, so while all this is going on, I want to know what was going through your head and how you were managing like those emotions, because I can't imagine the thoughts and feelings that come with something like that.
I was in shock. Like and I'm still going to be processing to this day type thing, you know, and I'm still going to have all these emotions to deal with and everything, because you don't plan for it. You don't plan for your baby to come out not breathing. You don't plan for your baby to go into, they put her into it's essentially a sandwich bag to essentially keep her skin moist, basically, because her skin is so red and so raw. So they essentially put her into a sandwich bag. I don't think I'll ever be able to look at sandwich bags the same way again. Look, I was very lucky in the sense I got to hospital, because if she was born on the side of the road, I don't think she'd be here today. I was very lucky that the Ambos made the decision to go to Hamilton versus Warrnambool, because it's 30 minutes north versus 45 minutes. Again, I would have had her on the side of the road, and I doubt she'd be alive. It's confronting. It's scary as anything. When you're thrust in that sort of position, you get to see sort of people step up, you know, and that sort of thing. Because obviously Chris had to wake our eldest daughter to drive into town and after the ambulance, and he's freaking out, obviously. And what was really, really good, I was in the throes of full-blown labour, and, you know, that's not a pretty thing for a 4-year-old to see. So basically one of the paramedics took our 4-year-old off, and so she looked after our 4-year-old while I gave birth. And then I was able to see her. And then actually one of our daycare ladies, we were able to call her up at 7:00 in the morning and say, hey, this has happened. Any chance you could look after Alice for us for a few hours? And yeah, she's like, yep, I'll be there in 5 minutes. So she met Chris out the front and was able to look after her, which was just a relief. You know, you didn't have to worry about, you know, manhandling a 4-year-old while there's all this other medical stuff going on. So you become grateful for that, like just creating that sense of people that you can rely on, people that, you know, can support you in your time of need. And like, I'm so grateful for that. Look, it's not what you expect, like having a kid at 26 weeks.
Yeah. But what happened? So you have her, she's out, they're keeping her alive. I'm assuming you didn't get to have that lay the baby on your chest and have that like connecting, and so you probably got to see her from the other side of a glass box.
Sort of, yeah. So essentially it was in this sort of room. I gave birth. Obviously there's 50 million people around you and that sort of thing. Like I was physically sort of well, so to speak. You know, I didn't have to have any sort of internal stitches or anything like that. So they got me up to sort of help move me around and that while we were waiting for the Piper crew to fly in. And I was able to sort of come over and like sort of gently put my hand on her type thing. And like she weighed 1.215 kilograms when she was born. So just tiny. You can't imagine like she felt like a bird, basically, so frail under your hand. You know, you didn't know. Like, I remember my hand was getting the shakes as I'm like, holy crap, trying to touch her type thing. And yeah, it's unlike anything you'll ever go through, and I don't wish it on anyone. I really don't. You don't know how strong you are or strong you have to be until you're faced with that sort of situation. So the Piper crew turned up about 9. She was born at 5:45. They come in, and then it's a whole nother world of confrontation. Basically, 3 specialist doctors come in, and they've got this big sort of, it's basically like a life support on wheels, in the sense of it's on a big hospital bed. It's like an incubator humidity crib, and it's got all the bells and whistles up the side. Pretty much took up an entire hospital bed, and it's about sort of 6 foot high. So again, that's another level of like, they took about an hour to get her across onto her things. Sorry, just bear with me. Let me just go grab her.
You're fine. Take your time.
Okay. Sorry.
Nope. Don't be sorry at all. I have a little one too, and I know how it can be. So they bring this big machine in, and then what happens?
And then began the process of basically transferring all her lines. So basically the intubation line that was keeping her lungs inflated onto their thing. Or she had a line in through her umbilical cord to push medication and whatnot. So then they put a line in through her obviously she's tiny, she's very unstable, as you can imagine. That takes about an hour, and the more you touch a microprem baby, the more stress their system gets put under. So you have to do it very professionally, very not necessarily quickly, but sort of slow and smooth. Does that make sense? Like, I'm sort of sitting to the back by this sort of stage. We had the 3 Piper crew. We had all the midwives, the senior obstetrician and the senior anaesthetist, who just happened to be on call that day. That I was just lucky that they were on call, And for example, to put it in perspective, how Hamilton sort of, how much they don't do microprem babies, the senior anaesthetist had done 1 in his previous 25-year career. And the senior obstetrician had done prem twins about 5 years ago. So it's not something that they do on a regular basis. And irony enough is that the Piper crew that came up, they were actually coming back 2 days later to do their training. And so they're like, oh, we'll just tick you guys off. You guys have done great, So again, not what you expect, and just about the situation, that's all.
So then what happened? Because I'm assuming she had to be in the hospital for quite some time, right?
Yes.
So how did that look, and how did you deal?
Okay, so she was flown into Melbourne, which is about 4 hours by car. I couldn't fly because you can't fly within 48 hours of giving birth. So basically, I had my baby 14 weeks early, didn't get to sort of, have that whole connection up on your chest thing. And which was another thing. I so wanted that, because I didn't have that with my first daughter, because she was an emergency C-section. And I so wanted my story to be different this time. Apparently it wasn't meant to be. So then we slowly drove down to Melbourne. Obviously, we had to stop every couple of hours. I had to sort of walk around. I had those really sexy looking pressure socks on, and like, we don't know what we're driving into. We don't know if our baby's alive. We don't know how long she's going to live for. We don't know what her long-term complications are. We're just very much freaking out at this stage, as you can imagine. We were really lucky, and in the sense of we were able to call my in-laws, and they were able to travel down. They're retired, so they were able to sort of meet us at Melbourne that night. So they were able to help look after our 4-year-old a bit, and that sort of thing, because all my family are sort of interstate, or Chris's family are interstate. So we have sort of no one we can sort of, here, take our daughter for a bit while we go sort out our other daughter. um, and so we got there. So she was born at 5:46 and she left about 10, and then we didn't see her till about 5:30, 6 o'clock that night. Going through all the sort of emotions and just trying to keep it together, I guess, for want of better terms.
What was going through your head? Like at that point? I mean, I know you'd be freaking out, but like what does that look like? What does a freak out look like for you when at this level?
I was in shock. I was grieving, like really going, how can this happen? How, why does this happen seemingly to me? Like, I feel like I've gone through struggle and all that sort of stuff. So, in my life, and I'm like, oh God, why? You go through, you're like, why me? What have I done wrong? Could I have done anything differently? Have I inadvertently eaten something I shouldn't have? Have I killed my daughter? Like, you go through all the big sort of things, and like, retrospectively that it's not true, but in the moment, you can't sort of get your head out of that spiral, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense because you're in it. So it feels like that very much is your reality. And there's so much uncertainty that you don't know if you should feel hopeful or feel grief. And I'm sure you feel all of the things all at once. And it's like, well, how do I process this? And then it's and I haven't personally experienced this, but you probably have should I have done this or should I do that? Who do I tell? Who do I not tell? What do we do next? Where am I going to be? And I don't know if you're working or not. And that's like a whole nother thing. Like, you get to the place where she is at. Yes. And then what happens?
Then we walk in, we get, and we see her, we lay eyes on her for the, second time in her life. And she's in what's called a humidity crib, or it's called an isolette. Basically, it's designed to keep their temperature stable because newborns then should be still in utero, especially preemie babies. They need help keeping their temperature regulated, for want of better terms. She's got all these hooks, wires, IV lines, everything. It still brings a pit to my stomach, just seeing it and remembering it and that sort of thing. She, had her intubation tube in. She had lines all through her hands, big sort of like I don't know, it's obviously a medical grade, not a cardboard box, but it's, sort of like that. I remember walking in and just like feeling like my knees buckled, like just you're like, holy hell, how can you keep this thing alive? And like, hats off to the medical team, they did a fantastic job. Where she got transferred to was the largest NICU in the Southern Hemisphere. So there's 60 beds in there. So that's a lot of prem babies. So I got to have her first hold and that sort of thing. I remember they put her in through your top. So it's called kangaroo care over here. It's sort of designed to sort of help, a bonding, attachment, help, and it helps regulate the baby as well. And so she sort of went in there. She had her little hat on, which is like a little sort of, we called it like a little chef's hat. It was designed to sort of, she looked like a little chef. She had like little silver bits over the top. It's hard to explain. And she did that. She went in my top and then she needed 2 people to get her from the isolate into my top with all her wires and her intubation tubes and support she needed and that sort of thing. Alice, don't do that. At this time, what
are the medical staff saying to you? Like, are they saying like everything's good, or like just take it day by day? Like, how are they helping you cope, and like what was the prognosis at that time?
Okay, so prognosis at that time is, it was okay. It was essentially day by day. She was going to go through one step forward, two steps back. They described what things she was at risk for. She was at risk of brain bleeds, and she was at risk of all these other things. Sorry, train of thought.
Basically, no, you're fine. I have littles, and it's like sometimes like I'll have one like hanging on my leg and the other one on my boob, and I'm like on the phone.
I know this one's about to go off to kindergarten, so you're going to go off to kindergarten too. So they were saying basically expect her due date to get out of hospital, and that was 3 months later. So like, again, that's very confronting to sort of hear. You're like, crap, I'm going to spend the next 3 months in hospital basically, if she makes it out of alive. They give you sort of literature which has these awesome little graphics basically saying her chance of survival is 80%. 80%, 8 out of 10 babies survive. And you're like, that's fantastic. What if mine's in the 20%? How do you deal with that? And each week that she got older increased her chance of survival. She had to go through, as I said, brain bleeds. So she had to have 2 brain scans. She has something called, and she still does now, she has something called a PDA, which is an open duct in her heart. So we basically, it's all babies have it, and when full-term babies are born, essentially when they give their first sort of cry, as far as I understand it, is what that pressure as they're coming through the birth canal closes it off. So she's got basically free-flowing blood between her lungs and her heart. So we're off to the specialist in May to help with that, because they treat it medically to start with, like medicine-wise, like simply Panadol and I think there was 2 others, but she exhausted all them. That didn't work for her. And she also has what's called chronic lung disease. So hence why she was on the at-home oxygen, and she still has it, but it is better. But she's getting there. She's making progress. So,
which is awesome that you even got to bring a baby home. I mean, that I can't imagine what that felt like. So, what was it like living at the hospital for 3 months? Like, were you there the whole time? Did you go home? Who took care of your kids? Like, what happened?
Okay, so basically the first night I was able to stay there with her, they have what's called sort of rooming in rooms. So I was able to stay in the NICU and come up and check on her and that sort of thing. And my husband stayed with his parents and our eldest daughter at just a hotel down the way. And then we were going to stay on-site accommodation, not on-site accommodation, but hospital accommodation. But that wasn't going to be suitable with our eldest. So we found there's a charity in Australia called Ronald McDonald House Charities, and they offer home away for home for sick kids and that sort of thing. And we've actually stayed at the house previously because of our eldest daughter's clinic visits and disease that she needs to help managing with the specialist clinics. So, we stayed at Ronald McDonald House. So that was about sort of 10-15 minutes away, and we had a room. There's a communal kitchen and that sort of thing. There's people from all walks of life there. There's obviously very sick kids and whatnot, kids getting going to specialist clinics at the Children's Hospital, which was just up the road. We were specifically at the Women's and Children, the Royal Women's, that's where we were. And the Royal Children's is just further up the road. We, so we stayed there essentially. That was about it was about 5 Ks, but being city traffic, it took anywhere up to about half an hour to get there type thing. We got into a bit of a routine after probably 4 weeks, in the sense of Chris and Alice would come home on a Monday about lunchtime-ish, because Alice would go to kinder on Tuesdays, which was 9 till 12. And so then Chris could go work a few hours in his office, in his job. And then she'd go to family daycare Wednesday and Thursday. And then Thursday, lunchtime, they'd sort of hop in the car and drive 4 hours down. So essentially they were sort of doing 800 Ks a week, which is a big thing for an adult, let alone an adult and a small child. Look, they did remarkably well. They, all things considered, like, we all got tired, we all got stressed, with all the challenges that Eleanor was facing. They did an amazing job. My husband did an amazing job, keeping things going at home as best he could. And, he was sort of thrust into sort of single parenthood, basically, for essentially 4 days a week. He was single parenting, and then him and Alice had to find their own rhythm and work out what was going to work for those two wouldn't necessarily work for me and her. So yeah, it was, what can you say? Like, it was hard. It was tricky. It was, any combination thereof.
So looking back over the past, let's just say those 3 months that you guys were basically like 2 separate, going back and forth, right? And then you have animals to add in, and I know how hard it is to like get people to like do chores for you and things like that. So looking back on that time, what's the lesson? What's your biggest takeaway? Like, what, or are you still processing, or does it start to make sense now?
I don't think it will ever make sense. I'm very grateful for the help that we were able to get. We live on a beautiful property. We rent an old cottage on a cattle stud. Our landlords, who actually live on the same property, they were able to help feeding our dogs and our horse while we went here, and anytime they sort of came to Melbourne, they like, do you need anything from home? Can we stop in and see you? That sort of thing. Can we take Alice up to the playground for an hour? Just offering that help, that support, you're like, where you could just sort of breathe for a minute and not have to worry about everything, that was fabulous.
You have enough on your plate just worrying about your baby, let alone everything else. So what was it like bringing her home? Like, when did you get the news that like she was able to go home? How did that work? What was it like bringing her home? What's it like with her at home now and with Alice? Like, tell me all the things.
Oh dear. Okay. So she was born on September 22nd. Basically the NICU that we are, so that's an intensive care unit. So once the babies get healthy enough to transfer to a local hospital, they will transfer you basically so that they can offer up the beds for more intensive care babies, which makes sense. All throughout sort of early November, we were like, oh, is she going to get transferred? Is she not going to get transferred? See, it depended on her respiratory support, and how babies, also prem babies, are prone to something called retinopathy of prematurity. And the only eye clinic available was through the NICU. So she had to stay there to get cleared through for her eyes, for her vision as well. so she finally had her last eye test on Thursday. I think it was about the 19th or 20th of December. And so still at this stage, we're like, are we going to be at home for Christmas? Are we going to be in Melbourne for Christmas? Where do we leave the Christmas presents? Is Santa going to come visit us in Melbourne? Like, you got to try and think of all these things which you don't think of unless you're faced with it. How do you manage it? All that sort of stuff. And she had to be, our youngest daughter, Eleanor, she had to be on what's called low flow oxygen to be stable enough to travel by transport via plane. So she was on low flow. She had to be on that for a full week before she was eligible to go to a special care nursery, which was down at Warrnambool, where she should have been born, and whatnot. So we got transferred. It was a disgustingly hot day right before Christmas. It was about, we do Celsius. I don't know if you guys do Celsius or Fahrenheit where you are. It was about 42, 43 degrees that day. The bushfires had started up on the other side of the state, so there was smoke, haze everywhere. And we were potentially on the list, but we weren't going to know till the morning of. So we were sort of just quietly hopeful and whatnot. And they said, yep, right, you're going. We're like, oh, crap, okay. So pack up all the stuff in the car, say bye to the people at Ronald McDonald House, hand our paperwork in and whatnot. And we walked in just in front of the Piper crew who were transporting her. And so I was able to fly with her this time, which was great. And God, it was hot that day. It was horrible. I think about 9 o'clock, it was 38 degrees or something disgusting, and then you go to like an airplane. At least the airplane was in the hangar, so it wasn't out on the tarmac, so it wasn't, again, all that horrible hot. So she got transferred down there, and then we got into the Warrnambool special care. We were there, so over Christmas, over New Year's, and that we were sort of getting assessed by all the people, trying to figure out a plan moving forward and whatnot. She was discharged on January 2nd. So that was 103 days after she was born. She came home with a nasal gastric tube and at-home oxygen, which again is just confronting, not what you expect to have to bring home your child with. We've had to work with obviously medical, feeding clinics, speech pathologists, physiotherapists, all that sort of stuff. She had her nasal gastric tube removed end of January, which was exciting. A little less piece of plastic on her face. She recently, so a couple of days ago, had her trial off oxygen in hospital, and it was just to monitor, see how her pulse oximetry, how that dipped down overnight and whatnot, because everyone's dipped down. It's whether she stays down and needed help to come back up again. But she did very, very well. And she came home yesterday from hospital without oxygen. So it's just about sort of moving forward. And the next sort of step for her is improving her muscle tone and that sort of thing. She's at high risk of cerebral palsy, and that due to basically when they're born, they have to deal against gravity, and they've got all these tubes and wires and that sort of thing. So they're just like, ugh. So they don't develop like a normal baby does, type thing. So she's she's a bit behind, but we will get there and just keep, plugging on and advocating as best for her as best we can within the environment of everything else.
So what's a day in the life like now with the two of them? Like, how did Alice adjust, and how are you guys all adjusting to just motherhood, parenthood, family of four? Like, what's that look like?
Look, it's not without its ups and downs. Look, Alice has done pretty well. She's had her normal 4-year-old meltdowns, as you can imagine. And when you add in the stress of the last 3 months, it's completely understandable that it hits a peak every now and then. She's had enough. I mean, she'd gotten sort of sick of hospitals before we were ready and that sort of thing. And she has normal sort of breakdowns and whatnot. She's back at term started now. So she's at kinder 3 days a week. So she does that from 9 till 2. And so then it's just me and Eleanor during those times. And we're just sort of getting to know each other. Because, you know, we essentially got to know our baby through medical. We don't know, don't put cords in her face. We don't know what she likes. You know, we've had to develop, all right, what's this cry for? What's that cry for? You know, all that sort of stuff. So it's been a learning curve, you know, and all that. Also, our eldest daughter, she has a what's called juvenile idiopathic arthritis. So it's an autoimmune disease. So if you add in her sort of medical complications with everything, it's a ride. Basically, you know, we've got to do the best we can with what we've got, and go from there, basically.
So what do you do to like fill your cup? You know, we always talk about like self-care and making sure that like you're taken care of so that your kiddos are taken care of. And I'm sure it's challenging. I'm just like, holy smokes, I'm sure it's challenging, but I know you know the importance. So what have you been doing, if anything, or what's that look like?
Yeah. So I've been trying to either listen to meditations, do like a tapping meditation, which I find really good. And do like journaling. I've been trying to keep up with that practice. Reaching out to other people, like reaching out to friends, family, that's not isolating myself, because it's very easy to isolate yourself when you're going through what we're going through, and essentially like living in a rural location. It's very easy. It's, you know, a few years ago, before I, you know, joined the mastermind and everything, that would have been my default. That since sort of, you know, doing the mastermind and, you know, doing all the personal development that I've done, that's not my default anymore, which I'm very, very grateful for, because it would be so easy for me to, you know, drop into a depression and drop into that. And I'm very conscious of taking steps not to go there, type thing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I say that I suffer from like the lone wolf syndrome, because I'm always like, I can do it by myself. I don't want to burden anybody. Like, I'm very much like I'll just figure it out. I don't want to ask for help. I don't want to reach out. And just being stuck in that mindset. So when things bad happen to me, it's almost like I retract back into myself versus, you know, expanding and asking for help. So I just want to say bravo to you. Hats off to you for recognizing that and changing that, because it's a struggle and you're going through a lot of shit. And so for you to be able to take that step is huge. Progress is huge. I mean, compared to what would have happened a few years ago, because I can so relate.
Yeah, like if I hadn't, it's funny how they say about how your struggles are, you know, doesn't happen to you, it happens for you, and that sort of thing. And like, if you're looking at it sort of, you go, oh yeah, sure. But it's really true in the sense of, if I hadn't gone through my previous struggles, it wouldn't have set me up for success to cope as well as I'm coping through now. You know, if I hadn't gone through the postnatal depression, the anxiety and whatnot that I went through with my first child, it wouldn't have helped me cope well with her medical diagnosis. If I hadn't kept following through and trying to expand and learn and, you know, be the best person that I can be, the best mother that I can be, you know, I wouldn't have been able to cope so as well as I can. I mean, it's not just that I don't have my crap times, you know, and when I, you know, stop and I feel, you know, this sucks. This is really, really hard, you know, and the future may be hard, but it's not. I'm not going to use that as an excuse. I'm not going to use my kid's medical diagnosis as an excuse to stop being the best person that I can be, you know.
I love that. I absolutely love that. I think it is so easy for us to use some of the circumstances or experiences that we've encountered as excuses, right? Whether that's children, whether that's jobs, whether that's money, whether that's, you know, abuse in a relationship or whatever that looks like for you. I think it's very easy for us to find the excuse and you're like, no, like this happened and I'm going to still show up as the best parent I can be because they still need you. They still need you.
That's it. Exactly. You know, and we need to be the best person we can be for our kids, and we need to keep learning, and, you know, the whole, we know better. So we do better than our generation before us, you know, and hopefully our kids will do better than us, you know, and just sort of pay it forward and just keep improving, you know, for want of better terms.
No, I always say, if you know better, you should do better. Like, I feel like that's our, I don't want to use the word obligation, but I'm going to, because I feel obligated that if I know how to do something better, I need to do it that way. And then I need to show the next generation how to do it. And it's just, I feel like we're setting up humanity for success. We're setting up our family for success. And really it's that paying it forward. So I love that. I love your entire story. And I know we're kind of coming in on time here. Yeah. So what do you want to leave listeners with? Like words of encouragement, advice, or just like know that sometimes it sucks, but we can still get through it. Like, what do you want to leave listeners with?
Look, I just wanted to share like our story, our most recent story, and know that let people know that, you know, even though times are crap, and, you know, it's hard and it feels hard, you need to keep sort of reaching out, do what makes you feel good. You know, what's the next right step? Ask, what do you need in that next moment in time? You know, just keep pushing forward, even if it's sort of slowly, you know, even if it feels like you're going backwards 10 steps, go backwards 10 steps, rest, and then go forward 11, you know, at least then you've still made that one step forward, that one incremental change. So yeah, basically that's sort of what I'd like to leave. Yeah.
Even if you have to slow down, keep on going, because one step a day will get you a whole lot of steps in a year. And that it's okay to slow down. It doesn't have to be this all or nothing. It doesn't have to, you don't have to be happy, positive, 1,000% with a smile on your face every single day. Like, you just show up with who you are, where you're at, and you focus on just the next right step, not the next 100 steps, because that in itself can create that overwhelm and that anxiety and the shoulda, coulda, woulda.
Yeah, exactly.
And that doesn't get anybody any far except for more overwhelm and more anxiety. You know, you can spiral one of two ways. You can spiral up or you can spiral down. And it's just keeping that spiral in like an upward, forward momentum, and know that if you do get knocked back off, you go back 10 steps, like you said, go forward 11, push through that, get to the next level, do what you need to do.
Yeah, exactly. You know, we're just so grateful for our kids to be alive, and you know, they have their health challenges and whatnot, and we're just, you know, just keep doing the next best step, next right step, where, you know, life, I don't know, I'm at loss.
No, you're not. I know it's a lot to take in, and you've babies climbing on you, and and this isn't perfect. Like, and that's just it, right? You still showed up. We're still having this conversation, and this is just life. We have kids, there's traffic outside. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect to share your story. And so I love that you just showed up, or, you know, you're showing up as you are right now. I have one last thing. If people want to connect with you about your journey, or if they have questions for you, how can they contact you? How can they be a part of like you or your community, things like that?
Sure. Look, I'm, you know, on Facebook. People can feel free to direct messaging me on Facebook, and that's probably the easiest way. Oh, look, I'm on Instagram, but I wouldn't say I'm an Instagram aficionado. You know, I've got no idea how people do all these stories and stuff like that. You know, I'm very technologically deficit. But I love watching yours. You know, it definitely creates my life. It makes my life better.
Oh, that's too funny. I am definitely one of those story people, so just keep on following along. But all right. Thank you for showing up today. Thank you for sharing. I loved all of that. And if anybody wants to get a hold of her, go ahead, message her on Facebook, and we will be in touch.
Awesome. Thanks heaps. Thanks heaps.